and welcome to A Blind Date with Knowledge Series 3, but this time with a difference. My name is Stephen Liggett, and with my long-time podcast host, collaborator, friend and all-round inspiration, Laura Brady, we hit the road, taking our interviews and discussions outside of the hospital on a journey to find interesting people with connections to healthcare and research from across the Northeast. In this episode, we meet up with the fantastic Chloe Baker. Chloe is the yoga teacher for the Northeast and North Cumbria Staff WellBeing Hub. As we hear in this episode, I have been a part of a class that Chloe has been teaching yoga poses and mindfulness techniques. And we hear about how these practices have really helped our mental and physical well-being. We discuss the need for reconnecting with these practices. And we discuss how yoga and other movement therapies could be used and utilised within a wider healthcare setting. We meet up with Chloe in a cafe in the middle of Newcastle. It was a really friendly and welcoming venue. We hope that it adds something to the conversation and it makes you perhaps feel a bit more part of the interview. Although you might experience some background noise, however we prefer to call it ambience. I really hope you enjoy this interview. There'll be contact details for the WellBeing Hub and for Chloe's yoga classes at the end, along with the usual means of getting in touch with myself or Laura to offer feedback. Without any further ado, let's get on with this episode of A Blind Date with Knowledge. However, we really hope that this episode encourages you and inspires you to take 5 minutes out of your hectic day to focus on yourself, to maybe recenter, reground, feel the earth beneath your feet, and take a couple of moments just for you.
Welcome to A Blind Date with Knowledge Series 3. I'm your host, Laura Brady, with co-host Stephen Liggett.
Yes, hello.
Hi. And our guest today is
Chloe Baker. So Chloe is yoga teacher for the Northeast and North Cumbria NHS WellBeing Hub. I've had the pleasure of knowing Chloe for about 12 months now, although it's only the second time that we've actually met. I got referred in to the WellBeing Hub after accessing some supportive work. So yoga was brand new to me, and Chloe's done a fantastic job in keeping me engaged. I think we'll start off just by asking Chloe about your journey into yoga and how you got involved in the WellBeing Hub.
Yeah, of course. So I guess I've always done movement. So I danced from when I was 3, and then that carried on to be like a passion. But I thought it was going to be my job. So my degree was in dance. But I had a back injury my second year, which meant I didn't actually do much practical stuff in my third year, so my dissertation ended up being written. But during that time, I was exposed to contemporary movement and lots of different ways of moving. And one of the things that really appealed to me, although it didn't appeal to any of my friends at the time, was we did a lot of outside, that in the words. And when I finished uni, I was desperate to do something with my degree. So I did a PT qualification because I knew I couldn't perform. That just wasn't going to happen for me. And then I did that as a job, but I didn't have the self-confidence at the time. On reflection, I didn't have the self-confidence at the time and really excel at that. So I ended up going back to what I was doing during my university, which was working in a hotel. And I worked with Marriott for the best part of 10 years and absolutely loved it. Had a really good secondary sort of job that I did as a sort of managerial level in the commercial world. And then I had my little boy. So I went back to doing yoga when I had William, or when I was pregnant with William, because I was very sick for the first 20 weeks. So I couldn't do any of the physical activity that I wanted to do. or was used to doing, that I used to get a buzz out of, because that's always been my way to release, was to do physical activity, and it was
a good way.
weights and running and stuff like that. I'd always dabbled with yoga.
What was your first experience with yoga? Was it before the PT or maybe
yeah,
the battery?
Long time. So when I was doing my degree, probably was the first time that I really experienced yoga, but really connected with it during pregnancy because of the breath work. It taught me the mindfulness that it taught me.
Yeah.
And during pregnancy, you almost feel as though your body isn't your own. So actually, or you're sharing it with somebody else at least. And that's a really weird concept. So that was yoga helped me with that. And then yoga really helped me because I was made redundant whilst I was on maternity leave, because it was COVID as well. So there was a lot going on in that year. And that's when I did my teacher training for yoga. Yeah. So, and it's really only in that year that it really evolved for me because it, up until that point for me, it had always been about the physical aspect of it, the flexibility, the strength, the cardio for like the vinyasa practices. Yeah. And it really only became more about the mindfulness at the start of pregnancy, and then since having William and being in that position where you couldn't go anywhere and see anybody, and what I thought was going to happen in my maternity leave was so different to what actually happened because we were isolated in a house, just the three of us. And yoga was very much the key to getting through that.
The big thing I've found from doing the sessions with you is that it's the mindfulness at the end of the classes that I connected with straight away. I think it was really nice to get like a bit of a focus back, or to start to switch on to the different like feelings or things that are going on. It's just really nice to get 10 minutes or 20 minutes a week just to check in. Although I do try and take practices on and do it daily, but I know you were very keen in the times working together, Laura, weren't you? Like you would take like 5 minutes out to check in and to ground yourself.
I think what you're saying about the mental like focus and the mental benefits, like it's like almost like a recentering to kind of gain your intention with how the rest of the day is going to go. And especially in a healthcare environments, it can be really stressful in the day. You see a lot of like I guess cases or difficult situations that people are in, so I think taking that time maybe after lunch or like midday just to kind of reset.
You get us doing yoga in the lab though.
Exactly, chair. We do some chair yoga.
Do some chair poses.
Connect with the breath, connect with the body. It's interesting, like you're saying, about sort of having it as a release from the body as well, because it kind of does create that separation where it's almost that space where you invite that piece into and you can take forward. It's interesting to hear your journey from sort of always moving. I think like ours similar went to my journey towards yoga, where it was I wasn't able to move in the way that I was used to, and sort of found this sort of gentler movement that satisfied that I guess craving, but then it becomes something different once you can connect the breath and can connect the mind to it. It's not just movement, it's surpasses that. Obviously it becomes yoga as opposed to sort of exercise.
Yeah, movement is the access, like the key to unlock the brain side of things, I think. And for a lot of people, so if you're thinking about it from a clinical treatment way, quite often if you say to somebody focus on your breath, they can't, or they can, but then they have to ventilate because they're too in their head about it almost.
Like holding a lot of stress or tension in other places.
They apply the thinking side of it too much. Yeah. And actually it's a feel. The breath is a feeling. Yeah. It's not something you can think too much about. So I think for a lot of people, the way into yoga is through the movement. Mm-hmm. Then you can develop the other things. So I think you'll probably agree that our classes and the way I teach them has changed a lot.
Yeah, absolutely.
Particularly for the improvers. So it's not so much for the other guys, but I can go a little bit deeper and I bring in a little bit more than I did in the first instant.
Fairly recently, you've started discussing like the changes in the moon and the Chinese medicine. You've started to bring it. And for me, I'm very practically minded, and so trying to kind of combine yoga practices, kind of my scientific mind, I guess. It did take a while, but when you like describe like the reasons for a pose or the organs that it's stimulate. It like finally clicked with me, and I can think, all right, yeah, I'm starting to get it.
No, I think like obviously we met in the lab, so we're both sort of scientific minded. But that was a big thing for me when I started exploring yoga, was the purpose of a pose, or like that framework that you can then attach it
Purpose
to.
is the word I was looking for. Yeah.
But then it comes all back around to what you're saying about having an affinity with like moving in natural spaces and having that connection to the natural world, and that, you know, the moon phases, the times at which in a month you would do certain tasks, or those things, that it's all sort of inherent. It's inherent in yoga, it's inherent in you because you're a living being and you have that
It's
natural
the energy.
Yeah.
And I remember talking to Stephen about this on our retreat day, and I think if you've got a scientific brain, we are energy. It's like every single thing that surrounds us is energy. So if there's a disease in our body, that's because of the energy that's not flowing in the right way. And so there are probably things, and not always, people that are really poorly, then you do need medical intervention. But in terms of looking at yoga as a practice, it should be used as a preventative measure.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that people can listen to their bodies early on, and if thing isn't quite right, then actually you can affect that through the activities that you then take, whether it's movement or whether it's mindfulness or whether it's being outside.
Yeah.
And actually, if you listen to your body, you can find those things. Your body tells you all the time. It's one of the things I say to you guys all the time, right? Your body is constantly communicating with you through your five senses, but we don't very often listen to any of those things.
No,
set
exactly.
up the diary that we've got to tick the list of things that we've got to do.
Yeah, and sometimes even the natural or the modern world now is not so aligned with the natural world. So the modern world, you learn to shut off or not listen to those stimuli. You know, sort of, I always say this about electric lights, about, you know, when it's dark, you should sleep. But we don't have to. We can just turn the light on and stay up, and that sort of go against what your senses are naturally telling you. But like for me, my yoga practice does act as a sort of framework to then check in with all of those, and like, you know, highlight any parts of my body or my mind that is holding some sort of like detrimental energy. And I think obviously the mind and body are inextricably linked, and like that energy could come from a mental stimuli or from like a physical stimuli, like the disease, you know, like when you talk about, like we've spoke about, Chloe and I, our roots in through movement, but you seem to resonate more, Stephen, with like the mindfulness part. And so it depends like where that, for each person, where's most needed, I guess, or where's the sort of focal point.
Speaking about the energy that we hold, we can transfer it. So I was starting to read up about this new, like, well, it's not new, it's obviously really, really old, new to me. The guy during the article, he described it as like currents, like currents of energy or currents of knowledge or kind of teaching, and it's that very practical for me thinking of it. It's the transfer of something to somebody else, and again, I think that's why I've really been switched on to yoga, is that you can see the teachings from Chloe is like starting to reach everyone in the class. I think we've all come on so much in terms of, even like my downward dog apparently is really good now, but it didn't start off very good, I don't think. But
I couldn't comment on that one. We didn't do that one in the lab.
No, there was no space for that one. But no, I think it's so just you see the improvements and you're able to stick at it. So the next question for me is, how have you found the classes for the WellBeing Hub versus the ones that, like, through pregnancy? Is there a big difference between the clientele that you deal with?
Massive, huge. So I do pregnancy yoga, postnatal yoga for babies, and then I do face-to-face classes for people near where I live, and then obviously online classes for you guys. I was really nervous about doing online classes because I didn't know how you would all receive, because for me it's quite an energetic thing. So, and I sometimes change my class based on that first time that I sit down in front of everyone and everyone's sitting there, they're doing their breathing, and I'm like, oh, they don't need what I've planned today. I'm going to have to pull something different. And obviously I did think I would get that from you guys.
Yeah.
But especially for the improvers, because I know you guys now, I can see when you're fidgeting around actually, well, maybe you're not quite there yet. So I do still get the feedback, and I was worried that I wouldn't, but I've learned to sort of observe in different ways.
I mean, that's really interesting because you kind of know just by looking at people. That's really interesting. That's really interesting.
I think that's a sign of a great teacher, because it's like everybody in class is then learning how to, adapt.
Well, on the retreat that we went on, I came in the door and Chloe gave me 2 blocks because she said, "Oh, you've got tight hamstrings." I was like, "I do have tight hamstrings." I was like, you can just tell by looking. And I think that's really, really clever. It's fantastic stuff.
No, it's amazing. I think one of my, I guess, points of conversation on here is like, so say somebody has tight hamstrings, so then they're going to do yoga to release it, or the question of Ayurveda, which is like life as medicine, like preventative approach, using yoga as a preventative of mental or physical like detriments. So do you find that people who come to your class like often, well, I don't want to presume anything, but I guess like more often people come to fix a problem, and then if then once you understand it can then be used to prevent problems. But I guess I'm just interested to see, like, if people come to you and say, I want to work on this specific thing or do that XYZ.
I think generally speaking, because of the way that particularly in the UK we view yoga, a lot of people do it because it's an element of fitness, and for some people that's it. Like, I need to move more, and I'm in my 70s, so actually this is probably the best thing. Or I've got a bad knee, so I know I can't go for a run, so I thought I'd try this. So yes, but I had a gentleman come into my restorative class last Sunday, a face-to-face class that I do, and he said, "I'm not interested in the poses. I want the mindfulness. I want the spirit. I want to get in touch with my spiritual side. That's why I'm here." So, and I think that there's been a shift since COVID in that element of it as well. People are now searching more for the mindfulness, not just necessarily the physical cure. And I also think, because I've got the experience of the PT background, and because I've got the pre and postnatal experience, and I'm really, really passionate about the pelvis, pelvic floor, abdominals, because of the massive change that you go through during pregnancy and postnatally. And in my opinion, there isn't enough support at all from a movement perspective to help women through that crazy period of their lives. That informs quite a lot of the work that I then do with actually you guys, because from the people that tend to come to the WellBeing Hub are people that are more sitting, doing their jobs rather than physically up and about. So there's a lot of issues with the pelvis and the abdominals because they don't use them in the way we're actually we're made to use our bodies. We don't use them that way. So I think it depends on the yoga teacher as to why they come to you, and I can feed in extra bits about pelvic floor strength, abdominal strength, core strength, because that's another area that interests me. And
got that wide history where you've come from. You've got a lot of different knowledge to pull.
So from a different teacher, people will come for different reasons. But for me, people know that they can say, "I've got a hip or pelvic issue. Can you help me?" And the chances are that, yes, I might be able to apply the yoga to the theory that I know about muscle. So it's all obviously interlinked.
Was that a big challenge for the WellBeing Hub then, when you were just given groups of people to work with and there wasn't really specific kind of aim? Because the journey for me, I think, has been much from the physical movement to starting to embrace and understand the well-being aspects. But I suppose everyone has been so different, those classes potentially. So has that been a challenge for you as a teacher?
Well, the way we did it was quite staged, if you remember, or not staged, segmented. So initially all that was available was beginners.
Yes, that's right.
So those of you that spent the first sort of, I guess it was like 3 lots of beginners classes essentially that are courses that I taught. So I just taught a beginner's class and used my eyes to see where you guys were with the screen, which is why I was desperate for you guys to have your cameras on at that point, because I needed to learn from you. And actually what's happened now is if you look at the improvers one, most of you got your cameras on, which is great. I mean, and initially you didn't have quite a lot of you turned them off, but I think you now understand why.
Just for me as well, I think I like feel more present if we're all on the screen together, if that makes sense. You feel part of something.
But for me, it then comes back to that energy thing, because I can see you and I can feel more from you in order to get that right.
It's amazing how much we've adapted to being able to do that through online means. I guess I'm really glad you brought up that sort of change from the pre and post pandemic of the ideas, because I think it's really prevalent through, like, even in my job as for the research year, they've seen a lot more studies into social care and psycho well-being. But I've got a question for you about what you're saying about the pelvis and the change from like through pregnancy. So there was a trial ran out of the academic cardiovascular unit. Do you know what I'm going to say?
No, I was just going to say it's just a podcast exclusive. Are you going to tell us something?
Not sure. I guess it could be a seed. It could be an idea. So there was a trial. It was the PrEPS trial run by the academic cardiovascular unit at South Tees about patients undergoing heart surgery, and obviously there's a period of rehabilitation that they do, like physical rehabilitation. And this trial, before people get the surgery, they did a prehabilitation where they did like physical exercise to, obviously at the time point of the surgery, then that fitness is going to drop. So they did a period of prehabilitation where they did physical exercise before the surgery, so that when it dropped, it didn't take as long to sort of rehabilitate. Can you see maybe an implementation of yoga in like pregnant women that could be implemented in that sort of way? Do you feel like there's
so I, generally speaking, get people, I guess this goes back to the difference in bodies that people come to me. People that are pregnant tend to come to me not for the mindfulness, but usually because they can't do what they were doing before and they still want to move. In terms of pregnancy and what has to happen to your pelvis in order to give birth, there are some really very specific movements that have started to come through. So there's a piece of work and it's been branded Spinning Babies. So that's been done in America. And they have a set of daily movements that you should do to help you birth, all very closely linked to yoga posing. So that's what I base my classes on. People that do pregnancy yoga need to be careful, and if they're not in the right hands, it can be detrimental. They need to be mindful of the fact that their relaxing levels obviously increase, so their muscle elasticity is significantly increased. So if you're with a yoga teacher that is not attuned to that and perhaps hasn't been pregnant themselves, there is the ability to push too far, and that can cause weakness. So there's a fine line.
So if this was, say, in the future implemented, and you had certain exercises to do pre-labour, during labour, and post-labour, would that be, do you think, necessary? Would it be necessary to have an understanding teacher present? Or do you think it's something that you could teach somebody to be able to recognise in themselves? I
think it's something you could teach them to be able to recognise in themselves. Basically, if you couldn't do it before you were pregnant, don't try and do it now, is the key. But the biggest issue that we have with pregnant people is in the UK at the minute is their level of inactivity. We don't move enough, and it's not just pregnant people, it's the world as a whole. But that mind-body awareness is also something that we talk through yoga. So I think it is something that you can develop without a yoga teacher all the time.
That's interesting.
You can tell that we work together and stuff. We've done this a while. That was the one question I was going to ask a bit, is about the PrEPS trial. I prep well when you do some exercises before you're going into surgery, especially cardiac surgery. what do you think are the barriers to starting to implement this holistic approach to healthcare?
Do you want to
I mean,
go
it's
first, or-
it's a big question, I'm sorry, but because we are so transfixed on especially patient outcomes. You get into the hospital till you're fixed or you're treated, and out you go. What is preventing us from starting the patient journey a little bit beforehand and following them through?
Yeah, I think we're first of all in like an age of convenience, so it's not necessarily a proactive approach to healthcare or well-being. It's more of a reactive
100%.
approach. So by the time sort of patients present with things, it's almost past the point of being able to do that.
Yeah.
Although I'd say probably the best way I could foresee integrating that is sort of in follow-up. So if somebody has had a previous experience or illness or procedure, then, kind of putting in place a long-term, not necessarily rehabilitation plan, but like a preventative plan for the future to, have to benefit from that, the preventative benefits of moving and mindfulness and being aware, because that mindfulness might not necessarily stop a certain disease or anything happening, but it will allow you to be aware of it and notice that it's happening, notice changes in your body and the site a little bit earlier, which would then give you that opportunity to do a bit of a rehabilitation, which we probably don't have time for now because people sort of present so late and it's already like past that point. But I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Chloe.
I think there's a lot of instances where I get clients walk through the door that have said, I've been to the doctor, they can't tell me what's wrong. So I don't know how to correct it. So there's that element to when it can't be fixed with a drug. There sometimes then isn't a solution. And then so I guess the first issue is the disconnect between leisure centres and public services in that way that are geared towards fitness, and then the medical professional, GPs, the hospitals, etc. They don't do this. I was just having a conversation yesterday, in fact, about a programme prescribed by the leisure centre for pre and postnatal women, that the Sure Start Centre or Health Hub, I think they're now called Family Hub, that now they didn't know about it. So there's a disconnect there. And then I think cost is another, or not cost. As a society, we don't value our health enough to put £7 a week into a class of going to yoga, and we also don't value it in terms of our time. We would rather stay at home and watch something or do the hoovering, or we prioritise other stuff.
The modern world is so like counterintuitive. So like often the things that people will do to relax is actually promote stress in the body, like scrolling on something and they think, oh, I'm just relaxing, and then actually getting a lot of data in a very short space of time that can cause a bit of, and if you don't act on that, then you've got this mental stress that's pinging around.
Big thing for me, and Chloe picked up on it, it's the disconnect and the coordination of public services. Like at the minute, has really broken down. I mean, we've only got to look at the hospitals and the departments that we've worked in. There's no one really speaks to anyone anymore. And if you had like a joined up health and social care, I mean, it's a huge topic that it's not going to get discussed there properly. But no, you could have primary care who intervenes so much earlier.
So just before, like it's interesting the stance of the NIHR kind of going more towards health and social care as opposed to the self-care. For example, a few trials I've seen are in that vein. So we've got one where, no specifics, but patient presents, it's an 8-week referral. So this trial actually takes place in the 8 weeks at the appointment, and probably not all of those people who are then going to that wait list will need an appointment because it could be fixed in that time. So perhaps like a structure like that would work well, where okay, there is something that you need to see a doctor about, but this is what you can do in the meantime to maybe ease your lifestyle or what the situation is. And then another one that is just qualitative research into those areas. So we don't have any solutions just yet. Obviously, we can talk about what we think is the best way, but there's no solutions just yet because we don't have the qualitative data to inform those solutions. So on a positive note, in this area, there is a lot of activity in the social research side.
Just before we move on to the last subject, it was really interesting that on the yoga retreat, Chloe needed to collate heart rates to kind of prove that people felt more relaxed at the end of the retreat for the WellBeing Hub. And I just found that really interesting that we still rely on kind of raw data quite a lot to justify these interventions, when really, if they just interviewed everyone who left that hall, like everyone was in a great frame of mind, felt great, felt energized, but you might have not picked that up through raw data alone.
Because I could see what was happening on the heart rate monitors at the end. And this is one of the things that I raised as a worry about taking that data was you all knew it was the end of the session. Most of you had quite a long way to drive, and you all knew you were probably going back to a house where there was other people that probably hadn't done what you wanted them to do for the day. And you could see that as soon as so you couldn't obviously see what people were thinking, but I could see as soon as their brain started to wander, their pulse went like up. So there's an issue with that kind
it's
of
just really
data.
interesting, and as well, I mean, for someone who was not that, I'm by no means an athlete. Like, so when I start moving, my heart rate goes up, and I'm like, well, that's good in a way. So trying to get your heart rate, because mine had, I think there's a couple of beats higher at the end than at the start. But that's just because we'd moved a lot. We'd had a walk down the beach. And it was just like trying to justify the retreat on raw data. I still find that really difficult to go.
You need a mixed methods,
Absolutely.
quantitative and qualitative.
I did submit all of those feedback forms
good.
as well, because they were
Feedback forms would have been a much better way of doing it, in my opinion. Again, only my opinion.
Well, again, it's just like that's like learning what you get from those data. It's very different because there's certain groups of people where you wouldn't get much on a feedback form, or it just depends. Like what's appropriate it depends on that
Again, it's
population.
a big topic, but like the way the network will fund research is all based on like recruitment activity. It's not about how worthwhile an intervention has been. You still need the evidence to justify your actions, which is a bit, it's still a strange way.
Because how do you quantify that? How do you? So obviously we do quality of life surveys and things like this, which gives you a bit the same as the heart rate. It only gives you part of the picture. It gives you people's experience. So like, it's not as measurable as other things, which is okay, because it doesn't need to be measured in that way to know the benefit of it, but it does to be reported and to issue the next year of
and that's your issue when you want to connect movement practice with healthcare. That is your issue, isn't it? It's hard to show that information in order to get funding to deliver it in the communities that need it. And I guess another thing that we should probably mention, because of where we live, is the access to that service is quite limited, depending on where you live. So I'm in Northumberland. If you look at the limitations there of providing that sort of social element yoga classes for people that have got pre-existing conditions or conditions that could be treated with that practice, it's not easy to access necessarily. So if you can't drive, for example, and you live in the countryside, then
you live out in the sticks somewhere, it's really difficult to get it.
So there's that element as well.
I guess in my mind, I'm always kind of thinking of new ideas and things, and I'm just thinking of you doing your yoga teacher training during COVID, and now we've probably got a lot of teachers who are ready to go, and you just saying, you've learned how to do it online, and there's probably this gap in evidence that we're talking about now. The way I could see that filled is just a large scale trial for people with like sort of multiple like clinical histories, to sort of show that it's preventative more than anything. Sort of not use it as a cure,
Should we
but
do
use
it?
it as a prevention. I think we should.
You write the protocol out.
Okay.
Just before we end, because I've taken up too much of your time already, boss, but the one topic very new to me, and I know you both experts, Chinese medicine. Give us like the rundown on a couple of things that we aren't doing in healthcare now, but we should, based on what has been around like 10,000 years.
It's definitely ancient knowledge that we're not implementing. It's quite difficult to summarize. The first word that comes to mind is holistic.
Yeah.
Having that like full view, and again the connection to your natural world, the natural movement through your body, like lymphatic system, your organs, the way that energy is naturally sort of distributed and can move through those places.
So you were big on the moon cycle.
The moon phases, yeah.
And so what could we be using that in the way that we treat people? Like, is there certain things that we could be doing in certain phases, or that we don't do in other phases?
I don't know if Western medicine is ready to align the treatments with the moon phases, but it is something that was done traditionally. You would only do certain tasks or certain surgeries at certain points of the year, or certain points in the week, or certain points of the moon cycle. So it is something that, like, if you look back, like, it is proven that it would be better to live in that, but we're so far away from living in that world that I couldn't comment. Little old me couldn't comment whether or not it would work in this environment. What do you think?
On the continent, they farm in that way.
Yeah.
People farm by the moon, but more on the continent than they do in the UK. So it is a process that is implemented in some way in our Western world. But yeah, I think medically that would be incredible.
It would be medically. And obviously, just as a brief overview of the moon cycle, like the highest peak of energy will be the full moon, and then after that, it's decreasing for the next 2 weeks. So simple things like cutting your hair on the full moon or after is better for the overall hair growth if you cut it at the time where it's natural growth. So that's a way to test yourself if you want to just have that evidence or proof that these energies are.
I think
prevalent.
From that point of view, in terms of when you're looking at medically how you can monitor or how you could track things, getting the data side of things, I do think it would be worth some research into particularly children, obviously because of where I'm at in my life at the minute, but children that present with ADHD, autism, those sorts of things. I think it would be really worth some research into how energetic cycles affect their cycles and the way they behave.
Often hypersensitive to those.
Yeah. So if you take the last
really interesting.
This week has been a really poor night in our house for sleep. Mm-hmm. It's because it's been a full moon.
Well, yeah. There'll be times I know we're both laughing because Laura knows what's coming, but there'll be times when I would come to work and I haven't slept a wink. And just the way my house is, I'd come down the stairs and there's a window at the bottom. And it would be a full moon. I'd be like, it's a full moon again. And you say more people die in a full moon.
Well, yes, there are a lot of people who have long-term illnesses, and I've read because I have read when I started sort of looking into Chinese medicine. Because my background's medicinal chemistry, so I was looking at sort of what sort of natural products have bioactive properties that can be used medicinally, and that's how I found my way to Chinese medicine and Ayurveda. And so I did look for studies like this, and I saw one that was about like sort of patients with long-standing illnesses and the times at which they've passed away there was a higher like spikes in that data for just after the full moon. So I guess like really to collect that data would be very observational to start with. You wouldn't really just have to watch the figures and collect and see if there's any trends or patterns, which I would think. I have faith that there probably would be.
Even if you just did one school over a period of like a term. Or 2 terms.
Oh gosh, yeah.
We'll get some funding and we're going to do it.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Exciting.
So just before we end, what is next for you, Chloe?
So for me, because I'm pregnant, at the minute I'm hoping to work towards designing an online pregnancy program that focuses on just what we were talking about. So an accessible course that's available for people during pregnancy to help their movement, but also to help them then through labour as well. And also do like designing online content and it's pre-recorded for the WellBeing Hub as well.
That'd be amazing.
The pre-recorded stuff it has been fantastic. So thank you very much, Chloe. And you should definitely do more podcasts or stuff for like mindfulness or something, because I would happily listen to that all day long. Thank you both for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Fingers crossed that everyone enjoyed our chat. To access your own confidential support, signposting or therapy, please search for Northeast North Cumbria.nhs.uk/staff wellbeing hub. Or alternatively, you can telephone 0191 223 2030. As discussed in the interview, Chloe also has her own personal website, which you can find by searching Mama Wellness with Chloe, and this specialises in all types of movement for the body and mind, with specialist classes for pre- and postnatal women. As always, you can access further links and old episodes by searching for A Blind Date with Knowledge on YouTube or SoundCloud. Thanks again for listening. It's really appreciated, and hope you access another episode soon.